Is it a UFO or is it a ghost? I don't know, but we're going to interview Preston Dennett, UFO and paranormal field investigator and author of over 30 books on UFOs. Episode 49 of the live edition of the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. Welcome to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. Coming to you from the glacial dumping grounds known as the Michigan Basin. I'm Michelle.
And I am Wayne.
And we are a Michigan-based husband and wife educator and podcasting duo that after having a UFO sighting in March of 2018 have started to examine UFOs and other paranormal topics within Michigan and beyond.
Topics include UFOs, the paranormal, conspiracy theories, ghosts, alternative history and archaeology, cryptids, and all things strange and paranormal. So sit back, grab a drink, and come along with us on this journey down the paranormal rabbit hole. All right, everybody. Welcome. How you guys doing out there? Can everybody hear us? Bernie Miro is here. Man, okay, we're going to be going through a lot of people on chat right now for this, so very awesome to see everybody. Got my lovely wife over there.
Yeah, the one who was
Michelle?
channeling her high school acting days on the intro.
Yes. Come on, acting. No.
It's because of the facial expressions. I
Well,
can't
you
help
know.
it.
Well, welcome to everybody to another live edition of the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. It is March 18th, 2023, and we're doing this live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And then we are going to be releasing the live show here right afterwards on all of our major podcasting platforms. So hello, obviously, to everybody in chat. Hope everybody is doing well. Welcome, and thank you for spending your Saturday evening with us. For those people watching in chat, if you have some questions for Preston, please put them in all caps, and Michelle will try. Sometimes we don't see them all.
That's my job tonight.
Yep. But she will try to get your questions and ask them to Preston. So also don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we truly appreciate that. So Michelle, what else we got going on?
Well, let's see.
Speaking of support.
Yeah, we need to give a couple of shout outs tonight. We've got Hava H for her continued support, and to Taman R and our new Patreon, Cheryl J. Thank you for your continued support. And if you out there would like to be a supporter, you can find the links down in the show description.
And also all of the social media links for Preston is also down in the show notes or the show description right now. So if you want to check out his stuff during the show or right afterwards, it's already there for you. So also just a quick note, this will be our last podcast for the next couple of weeks as we're going on spring break. We are sick and tired of old man winter here in Michigan.
You know, it got warm for a minute, and then today it just took a dramatic twist.
Yeah, so we're getting some pretty bad weather with high winds and some ice and snow and all of that stuff. And then it's sunny, and then it's ice and snow. And
it's just not right. The day after St. Patty's Day, it should at least be in the 60s.
Exactly. So we're going to try to get through this. Hopefully we have no technical issues, though. The area we live in seems to be prone to power outages. So hopefully we'll get through this. Trying to have Preston on for at least an hour and 15 minutes, but if we go longer, we'll go longer. Whatever Mother Nature and her best buddy, Old Man Winter, want to let us do. So we're kind of at their
they're arm wrestling right now.
Yeah. So, all right. Let's say hi to a lot of people in chat. So I see a lot of new faces, which is really awesome. Let's see here. Who do we got in here? We got Zach Diecast Mansour. He is here. We also have Guy Merritt. Michelle.
We've got Diane.
Yes.
We've got Wild Dog.
That's a new member. Hey,
yeah.
Thank you.
We've got Facebook user. So
it doesn't tell us who you are, Facebook user.
What was it? He shall not be named.
Yeah.
One not named.
He that shall not be named.
There we go. I'm like dealing with tongue twisters today.
You need more coffee.
That's it. We've got Cigar Maestro, aka Troy.
Hey, that's a new person. Thank you for joining us tonight, man.
Bernie is here. Michael is here. I like not sure. Not Straw sure is cooking dinner though, but not sure is listening.
Straw Dog? We can't leave out
Straw Dog definitely. Yeah. Hellfire is here, or Hellfire was here.
Yes. No, Hellfire's here. Not sure. That's a new name. Dolly Saffron. So Dolly's new. Thank you for coming and joining us tonight. And everybody else who's watching.
Hey, Mom's here.
Hey,
Hey, Dorothy.
Dorothy Hawkins. Welcome,
Dorothy's
welcome.
here.
Good seeing you.
In the event of a rapture, Guy said he'll still be here.
Yeah, Guy, nobody is going to take you when they, start the rapture. They've already signed you off. Nothing's happening.
Oh, okay.
All right. Bob Lazar and Beyond Discussion Group in chat. All right. Well, Bob Lazar, he's a Michigander. So good seeing everybody. And you know what? Diane, I got to mention you again. So welcome, Diane, and all the other people that are watching. So thank you very much. But, Michelle, we do this podcast and we talk to all kinds of people. But one of the things that we always do is go down a rabbit hole on what?
An escalator.
An escalator.
And there's a suitcase
involved. Wait a minute. Here we go. Okay.
And there's my suitcase.
There you go.
And I have more hair.
Yep. There you go, down that rabbit hole on the escalator. All right. So, man.
Every time I see that suitcase, it makes me smile.
Yeah. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we have Preston Dennett joining us tonight. And wow, this guy has investigated just about everything. And he's written a lot of books, at least over 30 books. There's one book in particular that has caught my eye, and I don't know why I haven't read it, but I'm going to want to talk to him about it. It's called Symmetry, a true UFO adventure. And I think Michelle was going to say something about his one book, Bigfoot, Yeti, and Other Ape Men. So, we got California Ghost here too. So, I mean, Preston is just the investigator of investigators. So this is going to be an awesome talk.
Well, for those I was going to say, for those who don't know about Preston, let me share a little bit of information. Preston Dennett began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of 30 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. Several of his books have been Amazon UFO bestsellers. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Fate, Atlantis Rising, MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus, Paranormal Magazine, UFO Magazine, Phenomena Magazine, Mysteries Magazine, Ufologist, and others. His writing has been translated into several languages, and I love the fact that Icelandic is one of them. He has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, including Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell, Coast to Coast, and also History Channel's Deep Sea UFOs and UFO Hunters. His research has been presented in the LA Times, the LA Daily News, the Dallas Morning News, and other newspapers. He has taught classes on various paranormal subjects and lectures across the U.S.
Wow.
He's a teacher too.
He might be too good for us.
I was going to say.
I mean, geez. I think that's why everybody's here. So
hey. Guy said he's everything but a world-renowned taxidermist.
Awesome.
Nice.
All right. So without further ado, let's get this conversation going and bring on Mr. Preston Dennett. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
We'll see what you think when you're at the end of this show. If it's still the same. But no, it's really great to have you with us. I've seen your UFO channel on YouTube quite a bit. And Michelle's going to open up with some questions here. But one of the videos that you did really caught my eye was talking about, so I punched an alien in the face. So that's something I'm going to want to kind of talk to you about as a self-defense person myself. When I see something about fighting aliens, I mean, we got to talk about that. So Go ahead, Michelle. Why don't
I
you
was
jump
going to
in
say
here?
that's a great catchy title. I love that.
Oh, it's perfect.
So I taught creative writing once. That would have been a great one to see come in from a student.
Absolutely.
The first part of your bio that I had read talked about that it was the experiences of friends and family and coworkers and them trying to, explain the unexplained. Can you tell us about any of the stories that they had told you at the time that really sparked your interest?
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, pick a couple, pick a couple that even you raised an eyebrow like, wow.
Yeah, there were a lot. Who knew? I came into this completely skeptical, had no idea that, a lot of people I knew were having these encounters. And I think that's probably true of everyone, unless you've asked everyone you know and love. I can pretty much guarantee some people have had encounters. Yeah, that was certainly true with me. I think the one that really knocked me down and said, okay, there's absolutely something to this, was when I talked to my sister-in-law. And she had described a UFO sighting, which was fairly typical, unexplained lights. She did have witnesses with her, but after we had to go around with that, she's like, well, I did see something else. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And she described this incredible encounter she had when in college, when she was walking outside her home in Van Nuys. This is in Southern California, with her dog, Sarah, and was walking by Stagg Street Elementary School. This is late at night, close to midnight, and she saw what she thought were two little kids standing in front of the school there, right under the floodlight. She thought, well, that's strange. It's too late for little kids to be out. And they seem to be bald. And she walked up, right up next to them, about 10 feet away. She was actually retrieving a shopping cart that had been abandoned. She wanted it. And at this point, she's 10 feet away from them. They were face to face, right? And they kind of swiveled, she said, and appeared to be floating about an inch off the ground, and looked right at her. They locked gazes with her, and she says it was like being woken up when you're awake because they were not human. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? She wasn't really even thinking ETs, not even when she saw these, because this was not in the media at that time, grays. But that's what she saw, two grays. And I had just started checking out books on this subject, so I kind of knew about grays. And I'm like, if she starts going down the list, I'm going to lose my mind. Describing the large head and the big almond eyes. And she did, of course. She says the skin was deathly white, almost no mouth, very little nose. I'm like, oh gosh, if she mentions a jumpsuit, it's done. I'm done. And she did. She's like, yeah, they had in these tight little jumpsuits, olive green with a mandarin color. She's got an almost eidetic memory. She's an artist with a huge eye for detail. So yeah, I was able to predict what she was going to say, as she was going down all the lists of details that we hear so often with grays. So that is when I knew there was something to this. She wasn't misperceiving. She was far too close for this to be any misperception. I knew she wasn't lying. She doesn't do drugs. So, there went all the standard explanations. Hoaxes, hallucinations, and misperceptions. It was none of those. So, yeah, that was the one that really sort of sent me reeling.
Did she tell you how she got away from this situation, or if they moved away, or?
Oh gosh, yeah, you bet I asked. I'm like, did you have missing time? Did you see a UFO? I was filled with questions. She got no message from them. They just looked at her. She looked at them. And as soon as she realized like this was not normal, she ditched the shopping cart and walked as fast as she could away. She says, I didn't look back. I didn't see any UFO. But she says, Preston, this school was a U shape with a grove of trees or a line of trees. She said a UFO could have easily landed right there and no one would have seen it. So I wonder about that. But she says, no, they didn't follow her home. She's not aware of any missing time. She wasn't thinking ETs. All she knew was that this wasn't human. And this was really not long after her UFO sighting, which makes me wonder if there was a connection there. but was not the first person or I mean, she was the first person, but not the only person that I knew and loved and trusted who had seen grays face to face, or another type of ET. So
When was that
imagine.
when she told you this?
She told me that, well, let me think for a second. I found out UFOs were real around November of 1986 after hearing a report on the news. And that's when I decided to ask my brother Mark, because he had said he'd had a sighting. So it had to be around then, late 1986, early 1987.
And that wasn't a time where there was a lot of people having these kind of discussions either.
So. No. And I was looking for books on this, and there were a few. You know, there was Travis Walton's first book, The Travis Walton Experience, one with Betty Andreasen, of course, the Betty and Barney Hill story. Not a whole lot more than that, really.
Was Strieber's book out at that point?
Nope. That came out in 88.
Okay.
My dad actually bought it for me. I couldn't believe it. He was so skeptical, but he went and bought it anyway.
Well, hats off to your family and friends that, came forward and, wanted to talk to you about these, because a lot of the times people just shut down. Even still today, they're shutting down on the topic, even though it's getting more and more mainstream. I think it really calls into people's worldviews and makes us feel, I think, a little bit smaller than our egos can handle, But I do want to touch on something that you brought up just a little bit ago about your thoughts about the phenomenon before you learned about your family seeing these things and the run-in with the grays. I'm a science teacher, and up until 2018, when Michelle and I saw our sighting, for me, anything about UFOs, it was just a pop culture thing. I didn't believe it at all until we saw our 300-foot aside triangle. And that's something I want to ask you about too, that was hovering over an intersection here on an interstate. It's 275 and a major road called Ford Road in a big city here called Canton. And so there was a really weird situation that really brought us into this field. And Michelle's a master teacher of ELA of 23 years now. And but my thoughts on it were this stuff is just cool for TV. Where were you at before you started getting these stories?
Pretty much there. I was very much into science. I was studying science in college. I was a huge science fiction fan. Ironically, that did not open my mind up to the idea of real ETs. But yeah, I was very much analytically minded and did not believe in UFOs. My only real exposure to the subject was on occasional TV shows like In Search Of with, Leonard Nimoy. I think that was the first time I actually heard anyone describe an actual sighting. And I just thought, yeah, right. Don't they know how far away the stars are? There's just no way.
Exactly.
It's real. I just completely dismissed it. And yeah, finding out that I had so many family members and people I knew, I asked them about that. I'm like, how could you keep this secret from me? Why didn't you tell me? And they said, well, you wouldn't have believed me, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, you're probably right. So it was, I can only imagine how it was for you guys seeing that and being like, oh my God, what is happening? Because just for
I
me,
gotta tell
you,
real. Yeah, because at first my mind went to because these lights on this triangle were so bright. I looked at Michelle. I said, "There's an airliner coming right at us," because we live right next to Detroit Metro Airport, but at the time we were maybe 12 miles away. And I'm looking down the road and I see these three bright lights. Well, I'm also a general aviation pilot. I have training in flying. I was in the military. I've been around all kinds of aircraft, jumping out of them, all that stuff. So I'm very familiar with it. So when I saw these white lights, I was like, those are landing lights on something huge and they're going to crash right in front of us. And we kind of kept going. And Michelle goes, no, when did our military get something like that? And as we got closer, I could see that it was a giant black triangle. It had to be a football length on each side, and then probably about 20 or 30 feet, thick. And as we got closer to it, I also noticed that the lights that were in the corners were not projecting, like we were picking up if I get sciencey here, the photons of the light coming out of the orbs that were in the triangle to our eyes, but it was so low. It should have been lighting up the ground like nobody's business. And it was not shining any light down onto the ground at all. And then I get this weird voice in my head that says, "You don't belong here. Get away, get away. You don't belong here." And I was like, okay. And it was instant terror. Like, we're gunning it. And we got really close to the thing. And when I looked at it, we were making our way around the on-ramp to the expressway, the body of the thing almost looked like a heat mirage. Like, I couldn't make out any details of it. I know some people say they see markings and stuff on them and like a texture, but for me, it looked like heat coming off of a highway. And this was March. Actually, our anniversary of seeing this thing was March 9th. Oh, and wow. It was cold. There was snow on the ground and, no heat, no sound. She put the window down.
Yeah, he's gunning it out of there, and I'm like a little kid putting the window down. I don't hear anything, but I'm like investigating every, all the angles of it. So, yeah, not a single sound.
Yeah, it was weird. And then it moved parallel to us along the expressway for, I don't know, maybe a minute. We lost sight of it when we went down in this sound abatement area. And we were down there about 3 seconds. We pop up on the other side. Michelle's looking out the passenger side of the vehicle, and she's expecting to see it. I'm expecting to see it because it was right above the trees following, and it was gone. And so that started us down this incredible rabbit hole of what was that? Because I, from a technology guy, science guy, pilot guy, I want to see what this thing was and how it works. And, I'm interested in the nuts and bolts type of thing. But as we've interviewed people, there seems to be all kinds of connections and with everything. And it just really flipped a switch for me, at least, in wanting to find out more. So was that kind of like what happened with you, with your sister's story and then your brother and things like that? It just almost like an obsession.
Yeah, my introduction to the phenomenon was a little less rude, if you will. I was sort of gently pulled into it. Well, not entirely gently, but yeah, it it wasn't really good news for me. It really stressed me out because I thought I had a pretty good handle on the world and, what is possible and not possible. And that was a huge monkey wrench. I had to reevaluate everything. It ironically made me much more skeptical of everything because if I'd been lied to for that long and this slipped under my radar, what else don't I know about? Was kind of my thought. And I ended up becoming absolutely obsessed. That's a perfect word. It's absolutely accurate because I did buy every book I could find. I ended up interviewing every person I knew who had any unusual experience. First UFOs, but quickly moved to paranormal as well.
Yeah, and we started our Facebook group just looking for people that might have seen the same thing that we did that night, and now we're almost at 6.5 6,500 members
like that.
of people that report stuff to us and listen to the podcast and everything. And it's a private group. So only people that share their stories with other people find out about our group. And then they come on and tell us their stories. And it's just, it's such a huge, it's amazing. People say when it comes to like Area 51 and all this stuff, that humans are, and I think Burton, our one buddy from our live show that we do on off weekends that we do the podcast like this. He said that the one thing that most people are horrible at is keeping secrets. But when it comes to this, people do not talk about it. And so, like you were saying, I mean, how long have we been lied to about what's been going on? And then you start digging through things, and it's really quite amazing. I don't know, Michelle, do you want to jump in there?
You know, and I see in chat where someone had said that, you know, Dorothy said it, you know, Preston Dennett's story is, you know, personal story is wild. So Preston, you gotta tell us about any of your experiences that have just.
Oh, as an investigator, you've
well,
got to have some
Oh, yeah.
amazing experiences.
Well, I mean, it was definitely life-changing to hear people describe their own encounters, but I wanted to see one. I absolutely did. So I started, hanging out. When someone would report a UFO, I'd be like, "Can I come over? Do you mind if I camp in your backyard?" I mean, I literally did that, and I wanted to see one. And it took a couple of years before I did. I think at some point, this happens to a lot of UFO researchers. I've looked into it. If you start investigating and you're deep into it, at some point, you will start having encounters. And I've had some very unusual experiences for sure. Quite a few of them over the past decades, 35 years now. But the first real one that's sort of like, okay, this is not normal. Perhaps that's not the best word, but this was 1990, 92, late July. And I was over at my brother Mark's house, who had seen a UFO. His wife had seen little blue beings, my sister-in-law, when she was a little girl. So they were kind of helping me adjust. I was right in the middle of investigating a huge wave of sightings over Topanga Canyon, which was my hometown. I had moved out. They were in Woodland Hills. So late July, I'm driving. Got late, right? So I'm like, I've got to go to work tomorrow. I've got to go home. So it's approaching midnight, and I leave their house in Woodland Hills. It's a very densely populated suburb. And I'm going to Canoga Park. This is in Southern California. And I'm in my little Daihatsu car. And I had just left their house, literally just a couple of minutes, heading down this tiny little street called Golondrina. And there's a hairpin corner where you have to pretty much go about 2-3 miles per hour because it's steep and it's a very tight corner. And as I was maneuvering this corner, I saw what I first thought was a bird swooping down towards my car. And I thought, well, that's not a bird, is it? Because it was glowing and it was round. I thought, could that be a firecracker? But it's coming towards my car. And this thing dropped down from like 300 feet up to the right in front of my windshield, a foot away, maybe 2 feet. It was about the size of a golf ball, a little larger, soft white, but hard edges, and clearly intelligently maneuvered because it stops right in front of my face. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this? I'm gripping the windshield, looking at this thing, thinking, well, that's not a reflection, is it? And it goes back and forth, 2, maybe 3 times, stops again right in front of me. I've got the sense it's looking at me, right? I'm like, huh. And it moves forward, kind of dips down and goes straight up. And the last thing I remember, well, this is where it gets kind of weird. I mean, I remember it going up, but that's all I remember. And in fact, I forgot the whole darn experience completely. I mean, I completely forgot it. I don't remember driving home. I should have turned around because that was my first real, like, oh my gosh, what is this? And I didn't do that. I don't know what I did. I think I had missing time because it was about 3, I'm not sure how long it was later. It was within a year, a few months. I just suddenly remembered that. And I'm like, huh, that happened. And it was actually, well, after that I decided I did have missing time. Because, I don't remember driving home. I've had sightings after that. I write them down. I call everyone up. I'm like, oh my God, this happened. That was the first of probably over the years, 20 sightings.
Wow.
Yeah, some really good ones too. I mean, I've had a few where they actually spoke mentally to me, telepathically, like you described. Boy, when that happens, you're like, wow.
Yeah,
That is,
because it's not your voice in your head. You know that there's something I couldn't describe it to you to explain other than it was a sense of fear. Oh, not even fear. I'm going to say terror that I have never had in my life that came along with that voice. Now, some people said, well, TR3B, they're using technology to make you so scared you just want to run away. Okay, maybe I don't buy TR3B just because of all the people. TR3B to me is the explaining away triangular shaped craft because they're so big and people see them, and then to explain it away, well, it's a new aircraft, it's a new vehicle for the military. But I'm telling you, I don't know how something that big could sit there and hover and barely move and then disappear and have some kind of cloaking. I mean, it almost looked like a weird cloaking device that was working on the craft, but in real life, it's I don't know. It really, that voice though. I mean, I've parachuted many times in my younger days, and I've never had that sense of fear that hit us. And well, it hit me. Michelle was like dropping the window, going, "Hey, what's going on?" Now, and then a few months later, I ended up getting really sick. I was the one that got closest to the craft at that point, and I ended up getting really sick. And then I am one of the very rare males out there now that within the space of 2 weeks, I thought I was going crazy. I was shaking. I couldn't concentrate. All my hair turned white. And in the space of about 8 days, 10 days, I had lost like 25, 30 pounds, even though I was eating. Go to the doctor. I'm one of the rare males that has Graves' disease, which is hyperthyroidism. Okay, that's interesting. So my thyroid said, see you later, you know, and I'm just going to turn on everything and just fry your body. And that's what it was trying to do. And the only thing I can equate that to now, my mother also had it. So I can't say with 100% assurity that, you know, it's not genetic, but for a male to get it, usually males get hypothyroidism, slow thyroid. It's very, very, very rare. So I don't know. It's just one of those things. It could be another piece of evidence, or
it's genetic and it hit them.
yeah, at that time, huge amounts of stress at that point. But yeah, I don't know. Michelle, did you want to ask something?
I was going to say that's your conspiracy theory over the graves.
Yeah. I don't know. Just how fast my like beard turned color and everything was really bizarre. I couldn't write on the board for my kids. My hands were shaking so bad. It was really bad. I thought I was losing my mind. All right. So, Preston, since you are an investigator of all things paranormal, including UFOs, what are your thoughts about the UFO and spiritual connection? Like, how are they related? Now, I know some people out there, and we've interviewed a couple of them, will say that everything UFO is demonic. It's demonic entities from somewhere else, and this is just how they're projecting themselves to us. And you go throughout history, they've been abducting humans since the dawn of time, and that's what these evil things do. They're malevolent. Other people are like, no, it's technology from another place. All of that, even Bigfoot and cryptids and stuff. So I'm very curious, with all of your knowledge and research, what you think of those types of connections.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a number of different ways of looking at this. I've certainly looked into that demonic theory, and I studied demonology. I investigated very dark hauntings, what you would probably call a demonic haunting. Read everything I could get my hands on, and yeah, I do think that there are demonic spirits, but I don't think that there's a good argument to conflate these two phenomena together. I really don't. Because a demonic haunting follows a very set pattern. And you can see this in case after case after case, where people will mess around with a Ouija board or invite this into their home or somehow got into, that sort of location. And it starts out with knocking noises and cold spots, and usually picks on one person in that family or group who is perhaps vulnerable in some way, and escalates to, obsession and ultimately possession. It's a very set phenomena. And what we're seeing with UFOs is completely different. So I discount the demonic theory of UFO origins. And I just don't think it fits the evidence. I really don't. So I will say that. But there is absolutely a connection between some of these phenomena. Because what we do see is when someone is a contactee and has extensive onboard experiences, say, they will start experiencing a wide range of paranormal. I mean, is kind of a two-way street, because a lot of people who are contactees are very psychic. That's almost a rule. But if you are a contactee and you're having onboard experiences, the chances are there's going to be a spiritual transformation at some point taking place. Because what we see are people who are having contact at some point will experience perhaps mediumship, mediumistic abilities, start having astral projection, feel like they can do hands-on healing. I've got a bunch of cases where people have physically levitated following a UFO encounter, or experienced physical levitation in some way connected to their experience. Not just me. I mean, Bud Hopkins had cases. Happened to Whitley Strieber. Stephen Greer reported this. Jacques Vallée had a case. There is a connection here. People will experience clairvoyance, precognition. Telepathy is a big one. So yeah, I think what's going on here is there's sort of a spiritual awakening that takes place. And it's not unusual for people to start seeing shadow people or, have ghost-like activity following an encounter. I think this is mostly what the connection is here. I don't think that this is one phenomena putting on different masks and masquerading as Bigfoot and the ghost of your aunt and a demon and a near-death experience and all. No, these are a lot of stuff gets put under the UFO umbrella that probably doesn't belong there. I do think we're dealing with extraterrestrials, people like us, physical beings who do have an interdimensional aspect and are very psychically evolved. We are all interdimensional beings. Let's face it. We have a soul. There is life after death. There's good evidence for that. So it's very hard to sort of parse all this out and explain it. I don't think it's one phenomena, though, but there are some really interesting commonalities and connections between all these fields of paranormal and UFOs.
Now, before Michelle gets on to the question that Kelly wants to ask, and I think this is a good question, but I've heard that a lot. People that see UFOs tend to then become more open or susceptible to seeing the paranormal realm of things. Have you ever heard the reverse of that? That people who have had, spiritual, interactions or whatever, Ouija boards, saw a ghost, then they start seeing UFOs.
Yes. Yeah, I think it is a two-way street. So if people who are profoundly psychic or display strong psychic abilities are far more likely to have a UFO encounter, because I think ETs are attracted to that. I think that is one of their missions, one of their agendas, is to wake us up to our own psychic abilities. And you will see a lot of people who have had perhaps a near-death experience will also have contact. I started to notice that. I'm like, well, that's peculiar. So yeah, I think it is a two-way street.
Michelle, you
Well, Kelly asks a question. She said that she was reading somewhere that people with the Rh negative blood factor, which I have, so this is why I honed in on this question, that there's supposed to be ancient genetics to aliens. Have you ran across anything in your research that said anything about the Rh negative blood factor being a direct connection?
I think it is a factor. It's not a hard and fast rule by any means. People of all ancestries and blood types are having contact. There is a high incidence of Rh negative among contactees. And it's very interesting because, now that this is something that's been brought up so many times, I do ask people who are contactees, anything unusual about your genetics? And yeah, you will start to hear stories about how people have traced their ancestry back to original bloodlines. It's not unusual for contactees to have, perhaps royalty or really ancient bloodlines or something unusual. One guy I interviewed in Utah, I asked him about that. He's like, oh yeah, I did have my ancestry done. And he said, it's funny you should ask that because he had a condition that's called uniparental dysautomy, meaning almost all of his genetics comes from one parent. It's extremely unusual.
that is.
And
It's almost like being cloned.
it's strange because he has encounters, memories of encounters where he was basically in the hospital room watching himself get born. The ET took him there and like, we want you to see this. So yeah, there's absolutely some unusual genetic things going on. And we do know that people who are contactees, it's often what we would call generational, meaning if you're being taken on board, if you're having face-to-face contact, probably your parents were, your mom or your dad or an aunt perhaps, or uncle, or somewhere in the family line, and it goes back generation after generation after generation. I just interviewed one guy not too long ago. He had an experience at age 7 and he was taken on board with his mom. She's like, well, I had an experience at age 7. His daughter had an experience at age 7. His daughter's now grown up, had a child, 7 years old. She's like, what's that monkey man outside the window? So there's 4 generations right there, all at age 7,
Wow.
Which I think is a genetic factor here. They're basically holding up our following certain genetic lines. I think some of the best genetics that we have to offer, they're very interested in that and preserving our genetic bloodlines.
Well, we do know scientifically that, about 60 some thousand years ago, humans were down to about, they say anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 mating pairs. And that was it because of a huge super volcano in Indonesia that exploded, Mount Toba. And that wiped out most of the humans. We almost didn't make it. So that could be a good reason why they're interested in seeing how we are doing, if that's the case, because our genetic makeup is not, very diverse when it comes to where we came from. Those 10,000 people, and you can, research this stuff in up in like the, what is it, Britannica, the British Britannica books. They talk about that. Just look up Mount Toba and you will find that out. But here's an interesting question. Yeah. Could Preston speak about the Bigfoot alien connection?
I can.
Well, and then he asks it again. He says the Bigfoot alien UFO connection. So he's throwing in UFO too. So yeah, what can you talk to about that? That's interesting.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this because I started getting my own cases. I was investigating UFOs and ghosts and near-death experiences and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh gosh, one of these days I'm gonna have to look into Bigfoot. I don't want to do it. I'm afraid it might be real. It's gonna open up a can of worms, and it did, because I did get my first case pretty early on. A radiologist by the name of Robert Murphy, I believe was his name. He did allow me to use his name. Lived in Canyon Country, which is outside of LA in a fairly rural area bordering the LA National Forest. and had a UFO land in his backyard. Blue and white lights. He didn't get a great look at it. He's nearsighted. And it landed and took off pretty quick. But it was the next night he had a Bigfoot show up in the same place. And I'm like, you're kidding. He's like, no. I had telepathic contact with it. I'm like, what? That turns out that is a thing. I had no idea. And he says, yeah, it hated my dogs. It knew I was watching it. It roared over and over again. He says, it was not a bear. I know bears. And he ended up having a little bit of a poltergeist outbreak following that. So there was all these phenomena coming at once. I thought that's crazy. What is he talking about? But, having a lot of UFO books at this point and buying everyone I could find, I started to see other cases like this. Did eventually get more of my own and really wondered about this because I thought, is Bigfoot an alien? Is that what we're looking at here? And I don't think that's what's going on because the Bigfoot reports go way back, hundreds of years. The Native American oral traditions talk about it. It's in every culture. They've all got their own names for it. It, of course, varies quite a bit, the descriptions of these hairy wild men or whatever you want to call them. So I think it's clear they're indigenous to Earth, probably what I would call sentient, intelligent. So I'm like, if they're not ETs, what's going on here? Because I started collecting cases. I ended up writing about this in one of my books, the whole connection here. Because there are cases where people see them coming out of UFOs, not kidding, going inside of them. A case in Colorado where a guy came upon a landed UFO and there's grays, there's a human-looking ETs and a Bigfoot standing right there being ordered around, essentially. And I thought, and other cases like that. And I finally come to my new conclusion, I guess, or assessment, probably a better word, that some Bigfoot are like some humans, contactees. So that's why they're being seen next to UFOs or sometimes going in or out. They're being contacted just like humans are. They are an intelligent species that we share this planet with. That's what I think the connection is, honestly.
Okay. So then what? So you think that Bigfoot are an intelligent species? They're not. Some people will call them interdimensional and all that. You think they're flesh and blood creatures, just able to elude us?
Yeah. Well, I ended up becoming somewhat a Bigfoot researcher. I certainly wouldn't call myself a professional Bigfoot researcher because there are people who devote, most of their time to that. I don't, but I've certainly researched it and interviewed a lot of people. And yeah, I do think they're flesh and blood. I really do. I think the evidence speaks towards this because people have found scat samples and urine samples and hair, and they stink to high heaven, and they do hunt. And if you look at the maps of where they are, it's where there is a food and water source. And as far as them being intelligent, I think yes. I'm not going to say all of them. Some might be your classic primate, but some are clearly intelligent. And I think they are perhaps spiritually evolved to an extent beyond humans and do have the ability to sort of interdimensionally shift into perhaps what we would call the astral planes, or do things that we don't fully understand and call paranormal, which of course aren't. The paranormal is a bit of a misnomer. It's something we can't explain. We don't know the mechanism behind it. So we call it, it's not breaking the laws of the universe, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's going on here. They can do things that most humans can't, but there are some who can. If you look into the human potential, there are people who I said earlier levitate, but turn invisible as well, multiply food, immunity to fire, superhuman strength. The things we can do as humans is almost unlimited. And we see Bigfoot performing some of these feats, and we certainly see ETs doing it as well.
So Bernie Miro asks a question here, and he's part of the Goofon family. And he says, is there any proof? I guess I would want to say, is there any evidence of Bigfoot remains? Have you heard of any kind of remains or evidence being found of Bigfoot that we can say are legit, people not faking it? And,
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, if you track all the anecdotal stories, oh my gosh, there's 30, 40, 50 accounts of Bigfoot bodies being basically scooped up. And you can follow a lot of them to the Smithsonian or various cover-ups. So there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of actual hard evidence of Bigfoot. And there are hair samples all over the place. But the problem is we don't have a baseline.
Yeah, they constantly come back. What is it?
Deer, like a type of deer.
Unspecified. I've seen them as unspecified primate or unspecified species or something, uncategorized or something like that. So that goes to your point about the, no baseline of what these things are. They don't know. Yeah, but the deer one too.
I mean, the footprint evidence alone, if you look at it, it's like, okay, there is something real to this. I mean, seriously. And the photographic evidence, this is all hard evidence people can study. There's a sort of a controversy over what constitutes proof.
Yes.
Certainly. Because it's certainly, I would say there's evidence to prove it in a court of law. Will a skeptic, a diehard skeptic, accept a lot of this? Maybe not. Because like UFOs, it offends your worldview. It's a core belief, and it takes some courage, I think, to be able to absorb new knowledge that is contrary to your paradigm, your belief system, your worldview. But yeah, the proof is there, I think. There are enough hair samples. And I think there's been some really interesting work on genetics along these lines.
Well, kind of like chupacabra,
If we only had a body, if there was just something in the public arena that we could all, come to consensus on.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to Zach's question, and along the line of Bigfoot, because I don't know, maybe Wayne is thinking of this story. We happened to be out one night, and a woman approached Wayne and I when she saw our Lake Tahoe shirts. So you were talking about California. So have you ever heard it or ran across in your research anything about the redheaded giants? Like in the Tahoe or El Dorado County area,
like in the Sierra Nevadas, she was saying that she had evidence that or she ran into them, that they live in caves in the mountains out there. It's really crazy. And before you answer that, let's take a quick moment here. I just need to acknowledge some people and I'm going to say,
sorry, chat. Dorothy, here's another rabbit hole for you.
Yeah. Redheaded giants still alive, living on the West Coast in the mountains. But I just want to say thanks for joining us to Haynes. We've got Extraterrestrial and Paranormal Encounters from Facebook on with us right now. Michael Kennedy, I don't know if we gave you a shout out before, but let's see who else. There was somebody new name that I had seen in here pop up. Metalhead's here. So welcome, Metalhead. I know Zach. Okay, I think that's everybody. So everybody, once again, thank you for joining us tonight for this extra special interview with Preston Dennett and just an amazing wealth of information. But now I want to turn this over and Michelle, tell the question.
I'm just wondering, because when she approached us, like I said, she saw that we had Lake Tahoe hoodies on, and she was from Gardnerville. So, which is just east of Lake Tahoe and south of Carson City. So she was excited to see that, somebody who knew the Tahoe area. Well, she started, just talking casually about, what she had experienced out there. And she spoke of these redheaded giants. Have you heard anything being from the, talking about California,
investigating everything, you've had to come across something about this?
I have no firsthand information on that, other than what's in the public arena. I've heard of it.
Okay.
I was introduced to the idea of giants fairly recently, and I'll say, within, 7 years ago. I'm like, wait, what, giants? And I'm like, okay, let's look into this. And I was absolutely shocked to see that, yeah, giants absolutely did inhabit Earth at one point. Whether they're here now, there are some fairly current accounts. They're clearly not here in any sort of large numbers. I've never run across a first-hand case personally of red-haired giants in the West here. But if you look at the literature on giants, yeah, it's clear giants did exist throughout America.
She said that there was a museum out in that area that actually had I don't know if it was remnants or some sort of like proof that these giants were still in the area.
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't speak to that, but I do, I have seen some really amazing photographs. Certainly, the indigenous people of North America have a huge oral tradition about this. There's all kinds of articles from the 1800s where people have found giant bones. And again, they're very, very much quickly scooped up and hidden. There seems to be a cover-up of this kind of information, but from what I understand, there are several museums across the world, really, that contain some like giant battle axes or enormous thigh bones, and here and there, I think some evidence is still within the public arena. But yeah, a lot of it.
As Michael Kennedy points out here, he's saying that the industrial military complex has all the evidence. That's very possible.
Well, and Haynes mentioned something about Lovelock Cave in Nevada.
Yeah.
So
that's one famous case. There was a show not too long ago, a reality TV show with two brothers who were going from place to place searching for evidence of giants. I loved the show because they were very serious about it. If you look into this, you will see the evidence for giants is absolutely compelling. I mean, it's clearly. I'm absolutely convinced giants existed on Earth. Whether they're still here, I don't know that. I couldn't tell you. I haven't looked deeply into it, but I'm convinced they were, at least, and until fairly recently, the very least.
Well, my adopted mom here says, Dorothy Hawkins, in my hometown, there was supposedly a giant buried in a hill. I live in mound builder culture territory. So, yeah, there is information from the Native Americans who also talked about encounters with giants. So, yeah, awesome.
I think it's only a matter of time before someone gets, this becomes into the mainstream because the evidence is there.
Okay, so Zach asks, Preston, if you could recommend only one of your books for someone to read, which one would you suggest?
I get this question sometimes, and ask me to choose between my babies. Which one is my favorite? So I will. I do.
What is your favorite child?
There are some books I would recommend. I really love Symmetry, a true UFO adventure, which is.
And I wanted to ask you about that one. So.
That's one I would recommend. Onboard UFO Encounters. It's one of my more popular books. I love that one. But yeah, I love them all for different reasons. The Schoolyard UFO Encounters, that one really touched me. These are cases where UFOs are over schools. I had a lot of fun with the UFOs over the drive-in theaters because who knew that was a thing? It is. I've got 100 cases. The healing, I did a book on healing cases, 300 documented cases. That one I think is probably one of my more important books. But yeah, I love them all. Please don't make me choose between my babies.
Yeah. So Symmetry. So while we're talking about books and this might be a good place to you know what? Why don't we take a break right now? Get up, stretch the legs, let everybody relax for a little bit. And why don't we go ahead and before we jump into talking about books and digging into that a little bit, why don't we go ahead and we're going to take a 5-minute break. want everybody to get up, stretch their legs, grab something to eat, grab another drink. I know I need one. My throat's starting to really bother me. So
Time to refill my coffee.
all right, Preston, do you mind sticking around for a little bit and throughout the break, and we'll bring you back on in about 5?
Very cool. Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to send you to the green room. All right, Michelle, this is killer, man. This is great information. I'm loving this one.
Now it just makes me want to move out west
I
and
know.
look into the giants myself.
Go hunting giants out west. Absolutely.
I'm already looking at Carson City.
All right, everybody. We are going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break. So please come on back. And all the new people, especially I saw somebody from Australia has joined us. So from the land down under.
That's cool, especially with the time difference.
Yes. All right. So Michelle, I'm sending you back. And everybody, I want you guys to go get something to drink, enjoy your little break, and we shall be right back.
Traveling near New Boston, Michigan? Hungry? Well then, you need to check out New Boston Coney and Grill tucked away at 37005 Huron River Drive. With daily specials, homemade soups and desserts, and a staff that makes you feel like family, you will not be disappointed. Give them a try for dine-in or carry-out at 734-606-5313. You can find their page, including their menu, on Facebook. Bon appetit!
There is 4 minutes left to this break. Three minutes left, everybody. Just 3 minutes. Two minutes left, everybody. Get ready. 2 minutes. One more minute and we are back. One more minute. All right, everybody, we're back. All right, man, that was a nice quick break, but man, I got to give a huge shout out to everybody in chat. Sorry if we're not catching everything. Preston is very, very just interesting. And when I do interviews, I like to lock in and listen to who we're interviewing. A lot of times I will take notes, but there's so much going on during the live. It's, hard to do all that at the same time, but thank you chat. You guys are amazing. Man, we've got about 30 people watching right now, so glad you guys are here. And just before we go on, I do want to let everybody know, if you do like our show and you want to help support the podcast, we are not monetized, by the way, on YouTube. We don't have enough subscribers that way, but we are we do have like a Patreon you could sign up for. There's PayPal, but the biggest thing that you could do, and by the way, all those links are down in our link tree. You can find all kinds of ways. Our store, we have shirts and you name it, we've got it. But if you want to support the show, please feel free to do so. But the biggest way to support the show is just hit that like button, share, subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell as well, so that when we do go live, you are very much notified that we are going live. So bringing on my lovely co-host and wife, Michelle. What's going on?
Oh, got my coffee restocked.
Oh boy, it is a double coffee night. I'm actually going with some Coke Zero. I have to turn off the coffee at some point or I'll never sleep. And Michael Kennedy says he subscribed and joined the Facebook group. Thank you very much, Michael. I have seen some emails come across about people who have subscribed. So a big thank you to you, Scott, Scott S. We got Kelly O and Penny K, who has subscribed, at least that I got notifications of. It looks like there's a lot more that have subscribed tonight. So thank you, everybody, for helping us out. And I know we're the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast, but that's just where we're based out of. We like to talk to everybody from anywhere. So don't think that we only talk about Michigan stuff, but it is kind of easy for us because our state is insanely paranormal and lots of UFOs that we have discovered lately, especially when it came to 1966, the whole swamp gas situation, which everybody knows that story. If not, man, you want to talk about some guests we got lined up? I'm just going to drop a little hint.
This summer's going to be a wild ride.
Swamp gas my ass. Interview part 3 coming up. So that'll be toward the end of April. That's right. Ray Szymanski, the author of Swamp Gas My Ass, will be joining us with some special secret information, but that's about as far as I can say.
We've got some disclosure going on.
Yeah. And then in this summer, I'm not going to mention any names, but all I'm going to say is that the guests we have coming up in the summer are going to be a little bit different, but they're both big names. And very well known on TV and movies. So hold on to your hats for that. That'll be this summer. So I've been in contact with people's agents and they have agreed to come on, and it's going to be amazing. I'm very, very excited. So, Michelle,
Zach, my gas is pretty swampy.
Oh, all right, Zach. Well, hopefully you can turn that into a fuel and get your car running with that. But so, all right. Yeah, chat is going crazy here. So thank you, everybody, once again for sticking around. And let's go ahead and bring on our guest of honor tonight, the one, the only, Preston Dennett. Preston, thanks for sticking around, man. We're at an hour and 17.
Very cool.
So far, so good. You know, no ice on the wires, taking everything out yet. So, all right. So let's talk about some books here that, and I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe it's synchronicity. I don't know. Something's pulling me to this one called Symmetry, a true UFO adventure. And I think you put that out in, is it 2022?
Yep, it's been out 1 year now.
Okay. So I know which book I'm going to be ordering here soon. And it's going to be that one. And I cannot explain why I'm being drawn to that book in your list of books here. So care to, and you mentioned it yourself as one of the first ones you'd want somebody to kind of look at. Can you fill us in? What's going on here in this book? And why might I be so attracted to it? I don't, it's weird. My eyes keep going right to it every time.
Yeah, well, I love that one. You know, I've written a lot of books. This is the first one that really covers one person's story exclusively. Dolly Safran is her name. She's an excellent witness, former nurse, Department of Defense employee, lifeguard, school bus driver at one point.
Is that the Dolly who's in our chat?
Dolly Safran, yeah, probably.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah, she's amazing. She worked at a zoo at one point. She calls herself an animal baby mama, and I think how she puts it. A lot of contactees have a really strong relationship to animals. Yeah, she's amazing. And her case, I can say this with absolute confidence and joy, really, is the most extensive case that I've ever investigated. And what I like about her is she's what UFO researchers would call a fully conscious UFO contactee, meaning she hasn't used hypnosis, doesn't need hypnosis, did have missing time as a young girl, but at age 14 had a major, well, it was more than a sighting in her home in the Florida Everglades, 1973. UFO dropped down and she saw little ETs looking out the window, little grays, dived under her bed, her room filled with light, and that's all she remembered at first. She woke up the next morning and went into the kitchen, and her mom's like, I don't want to talk about it. She did not like the subject. It quite frightened her. Her dad, however, was himself a contactee, and he had heard Dolly trying to describe this sighting to her mother and basically told her, you need to go and meditate. So that's what Dolly did. And just through pure willpower and a concerted effort to recall what happened, she did. And recalled a very extensive onboard experience in which she was taken on board, given a tour of the craft, as often happens, met a tall gray who she had met many times before. She calls this gray Mama, as well as the ship itself, who she calls Talata. The ship itself is what we would think of as alive, embodied by a fifth dimensional entity. So this is how Dolly's story began. You know, they took her to see the planet Saturn. When she told me that, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what Jay Gardner described. Ray Fowler of Betty Andreasson fame had that experience when he was a young boy. But yeah, took her on this whole adventure and basically asked her, you know, we're so glad you've woken up to contact. Would you like to work with us? And she said, yes, I very much would like to. And they offered her many different things that she could do to work with them. And she's like, well, I'd really love to learn how to fly the craft, not thinking that they would say yes, but they did. And that also intrigued me because I have talked to other people who've described that experience, being sat down in the pilot's seat and given that opportunity. And that became a big part of her experiences. So following this experience at age 14, she had very regular contact, twice a week for pretty much the rest of her life. So we're talking thousands of onboard experiences, fully conscious, adding up to what amounts to years of experiences with them. So that's why I recommend this book. I think it has the answers. She's got a clearer idea of what's going on than anyone else I've ever talked to. She filled in all the blanks for me, connected the dots, because I had a lot of the information she was sharing, but it was very piecemeal, very much through the lens of fear, recalled under hypnosis, distorted in some cases. But yeah, her case is so amazing. I could talk for hours about it.
All right, Michelle, what is Guy talking about here?
Well, Guy asks, why do so many people have bad experiences and Dolly's experiences are extremely positive? So just out of curiosity, have you found that, a lot of the experiences that you've talked about with others during your investigation, is there a balance between, negative and positive? Or are they more one way or the other, like more negative, and Dolly's case is very rare?
No, Dolly's case is not rare. It is basically the norm, but there's a lot of distortion and fear surrounding this subject and misinformation, frankly. There are not what I would call so many negative experiences. I will say that there are some, or certainly people who perceive it that way. And this is actually especially true when people have contact initially. It can be very frightening for people. There's often a very strong fear reaction. Because when you find grays, perhaps in your bedroom, or wake up on board a craft and you're being physically examined, a lot of people's first response is sheer terror, and they will panic. And this causes them to be rendered paralyzed temporarily. The ETs will do this to protect not only themselves, but the patient, if you will. And often this point, people will have missing time because the ETs don't want to scare people. They don't want to cause a negative experience. In fact, the first thing they will tell almost everybody, almost without exception, is don't be afraid. Have no fear. No harm will come to you. We're not here to hurt you. Everything is fine. Calm down. But that is not their agenda at all. The problem is we are very fear-based in our thinking. There is a concerted effort by the media and I'll call them the secret government cabal, 1%ers, the folks behind the cover-up, to portray this as a negative phenomena when it's not. I encourage everyone to take a very measured, objective look at the evidence. Don't look to the government for answers. We know they lie. They have been lying from the beginning. They're still lying. If you want to find the truth about contact, look to the people who are having the experiences. And having interviewed, this is a very controversial subject, and I get
that's good because I was going to ask you about that.
The people who are having contact will tell you what happens to them. And people who even perceive this as a negative experience will describe it in the same way that people who perceive it as a positive experience will. What happens to people is they are taken on board. Yes, they're physically examined. This is when healings will take place. And I can tell you that is very common. It's not at all unusual. I've got 300 plus documented cases. Pretty much every major researcher out there, they all have multiple cases, healed of everything you can imagine, seriously. So this is the worst I hear, is the physical exam, which on occasion people do report pain. Often the ETs will alleviate the pain, but that is the worst I hear. I have no cases of what I would call outright sadism or torture or all the horrible and heinous things that we humans do to each other, beating each other up and assaulting and just horrific things. No, that's not what takes place when someone's taken on board. They're physically examined, and if they don't react with absolute fear, they will be given a tour of the craft. Happens so often. They'll be shown the engine room. They'll be taken up to what I would call the observation deck. The walls will turn transparent. They're like, look, there's the moon. There's the Earth. Would you like to see Saturn? Even to other planets. Not at all uncommon. They will take you to the control room. I hear this over and over and over again. There's a very strong spiritual aspect to all of this that is often overlooked and pushed aside and ignored and suppressed by major researchers out there, especially in the beginning when it was all, let's prove this is a nuts and bolts phenomenon. We don't want to talk about the healings, the levitation, the telepathy, the spiritual awakening that people are experiencing. So what happens when someone is taken on board, they're given messages, and they're very much for our benefit. These are messages that warn us against nuclear proliferation, our warlike ways, the destruction of the environment, pollution, the greed and corruption that's choking our society. So if you look at these objectively and remove your own preconceptions about the contact phenomenon, what it is, the agenda of it, you can see this is what happens. I see it over and over again. People can come away from this with trauma and PTSD and like insomnia, but the vast majority of people I interview tell me that this was an experience that they would not trade for anything, that it's enriched their lives, that they're very happy to have had it. This is not always true. You know, I've interviewed some people who are like fundamentally religious and still believe it was demonic. I have run into that 3, 4, 5 times. This is out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases. The vast majority feel like this is a benevolent, positive experience. And it's clear, if you look at this, that they are very advanced technologically, spiritually, morally, ethically, have been around forever, could take over so easily if they wanted, and they haven't. We're still here. People come away from the contact experience, as I said, healed and spiritually awakened. That is their agenda, to preserve our genetics. This is why they're taking people on board, honestly, and to wake you up to your own abilities. And, you know, you can see that this is overall very positive.
Have you heard in your investigations, though, like anyone who has had like an abduction experience, that when they were taking, they knew that they had some sort of medical illness here, but when abducted and, you know, probed or investigated by the ETs, that when they like came back into, you know, existence and reality here, that they were well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, these are the healings, and they run the gamut of flesh wounds, kidney stones, diabetes, diphtheria. These are well verified cases, 30 plus of cancer, mental problems too. There are people who've been suicidal and had an encounter, and that was lifted. So it runs, you know, tumors, very well verified cases of tumors disappearing following an encounter, jaundice, hepatitis, kidney disease, liver disease, backaches. I mean, I can go on. There was a case from Leonard Stringfield. You know, all the major researchers have these, I'm telling you. He interviewed a guy by the name of Chuck Doyle, a teenager from Florence, Kentucky, who had a UFO drop down and put a beam of light on him and cured him of a head cold, of all things. So yeah, some people are told, well, you have an illness that they're not aware of, and the ETs will fix that.
You know, Preston, you gave us that list of things like that they would be concerned about, such as the environment and nuclear proliferation and all this list. One of the things I never hear people bring up, and maybe you can solve this for me and tell me, oh yeah, they're worried about that too, is just natural disasters in general. Massive earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, asteroids slamming into the planet that ended the dinosaurs, you know, things like that. Do we get many warnings or anything from them about those kind of things as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. There was a lady I interviewed who lived in Topanga Canyon and had an encounter the day before the Northridge earthquake, and says that the ETs basically saved her life because she got out of bed, and when that earthquake struck, she had a large marble statue which fell right onto the bed and would have crushed her. There was another case I interviewed involving a lady by the name of Pat Cates from Louisiana, who had an experience where she was taken on board. She's like, oh, this is one of my weird UFO dreams. And this one was a doozy. And she described how she was taken to what she believed was somewhere in South America, perhaps Mexico, because it didn't look like the United States. A UFO landed, and she, with the ETs, started taking people out of this large village and putting them on board the craft. She said it was very strange because everyone just followed them on board. Then off in the distance, this volcano exploded, and they scooped up more people, both before, during, and even after this volcano exploded. And the next thing she knows, she says they must have scooped up well over 1,000, 2,000 people. There was another very large craft right next to hers that she was in, so that was doing the same thing. And she's like, was this a dream? This is one of my UFO experiences. I know they're not dreams, but this is... She's telling her friend this on the phone after she, wakes up in Louisiana. The UFO landed on her driveway and put her back in her bed. And she's describing this to her friend. Her friend's like, Pat, you better turn on the TV right now. Hang up the phone and turn on the TV, which Pat did. And the volcano, that's called the Nevado del Ruiz volcano, had just exploded in Colombia. Her quote, UFO dream, was on TV. And the town of Armero was the town she saw. It was buried under some 30 feet of mud and debris and volcanic, debris. And some 27,000 people were killed. I'm going to lower that number because she was there and saw thousands of people being scooped up and protected, saved, presumably taken off planet, because I don't think they were returned. And there are the cases like this.
Not sure. Okay. Not sure has asked a question. Didn't Barney and Betty Hill get ill? I think that's supposed to be ill, not owl.
I would not say that is true. Barney did have some warts, I think, following it, and his ulcer got a little bit worse, but he already had that ulcer. There was some stress going on there. So I don't believe that's true. I've looked into possible injury cases, and there's a few of what I would call, most common would be eye irritation or light sensitivity. That does happen. There are some cases, a few scattered ones, of people who've gotten too close to UFOs and been burned. I would point to the Stephen McCallick case as being probably a legit case of someone who ran up to a landed UFO. Probably not a good idea. People often point to the Betty Cash incident in Huffman, Texas, 1981, Vicki and Colby Landrum, as a case of a UFO injury, when it's clearly a reverse engineered government project, because it was this diamond-shaped object spitting out fire, surrounded by helicopters. So I don't think that's a legit case of a UFO injury. But you get a couple of those. I mean, Dolly Safran in the book Symmetry talks about a case where she was on board and they had landed and a man came running up to the UFO and he did get burned. And they pulled him on board and healed him. So, yeah, there are a few cases of injuries, but the healings far outnumber them. This is an important point because the healing cases don't get near the attention they deserve. I think because they speak to the truth of the UFO phenomena, that it's not nefarious. It really isn't. There are perhaps hostile ETs out there, but I don't think they have star travel capability. Look at humans. We're the hostile ones. Look how we treat each other. There are probably people like us out there. But once you reach that level of technology, you also reach to be able to travel interstellar distances, you've also reached a moral and ethical level where you're not going to hurt yourself or others. This is my assessment based on the actual case studies, and I challenge anyone to look at the actual cases yourself, and you will see that this is what happens when people are taken on board.
Can we get back into some little controversial stuff here for a minute? I want to stir the pot.
All right.
All right.
Let me get a sip of water.
Well, you were kind of talking about, the government. And then I had somebody's comment up here talking about Corbell and who's his buddy? Jeff or Knapp, right? And I am on the fence with these guys, but I'm going to say I don't trust our government when it comes to this stuff, especially the digging I've done and people I've talked to when it came to, this is it, Michael Kennedy. The people that I've talked to about the 1966 major UFO flap that was seen by hundreds of co-eds at Hillsdale College here in Michigan, and they explained it away as swamp gas, and then eventually Hynek left Project Blue Book and said, yeah, we were told that we had to come up with explanations. So for me, I put like George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell kind of in these same things. I mean, I want to believe that they are trying to do good by putting information out there, but a lot of the stuff just seems like it's not vetted, it's not investigated, it's just we're throwing it out there to help the government provide a narrative of, yeah, there are these UAPs so we can get an office and a money. And then you have people like Lou Elizondo out there, Sean Cahill, and all that. So yeah, I'm dropping names, guys. I'm sorry. But I find people more like Preston and the actual abductees and people that we talk to on our show more legitimate than anybody who's putting themselves, in a documentary and selling it to make money. I'm sorry. That's just the way that I am. So Preston, what do you think? Am I wrong?
Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence. I call them contactees, by the way.
Okay.
I think,
there you
as
go.
opposed to abductees.
Yeah, I guess we're contactees because of what we saw. So yeah.
I think that would be the most accurate term. And I have to give kudos to anyone who's trying to do work in this field and publicize the fact that UFOs are real. I have talked to George Knapp. I think he's a legit researcher.
Okay.
He worked very hard, working with Bob Lazar and trying to get his story out.
See, and I'm sorry, but I believe Bob Lazar. I know it's weird, but
I think he's legit too. I do.
Yeah.
Dolly Saffron says, "Oh yeah, he's the real deal," and she's in a position to know. And I talked to another contactee who's like, "I believe him because I was taken on board a craft, and boy, when I saw those drawings from Bob Lazar, that was exactly the craft I was on." So I mean, Bob Lazar's a whole big story in and of itself.
That's huge.
But I think the problem here is we do have a government that is providing disinformation and is covering this up. This is not speculation. This is easily demonstrable. So we know this is true. We know there are things like MILABs as well, military abductions, which is more muddy water in this field, and some real bad actors in this field in terms of providing disinformation and false narratives. There's some people who are on my naughty list, and I'm not going to name names unless they've passed away. Perhaps Donald Menzel. I think he's a good example of someone who is a disinformation artist. Phil Klass. There are some current ones. There are some good researchers out there. I like Barbara Lamb. I think Timothy Good is, he's not so active anymore, but I like his stuff. Albert Rosales, his books, The Humanoids Amongst Us, is a really valuable tool. I think he's legit. Michael Schratt. I think he's an honest guy.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
We've had him on here. He is without a doubt a very thorough and honest researcher. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody more straight-laced than him when it comes to this.
Barbara Lamb. I love the Lorenzens. They're no longer with us, but they were true pioneers. And Donald Kehoe and some of the James McDonald. Jalen Hynek, good guy. I talked to his son, Paul Hynek, and Jalen Hynek, did toe the party line for years. But as you mentioned, it was the Hillsdale College case that says he's like, that's it. I am done.
He drew the line, because he destroyed anybody in Michigan coming forward after 1966 to talk about UFOs. So much so I've lived in Michigan pretty much my whole life except for my military stint. And nobody's ever said anything to me. And we didn't find out anything about this till we started this podcast like 2.5 years ago. We're like, what? All of these witnesses, the police officers, the sheriff, all of the co-eds and people report the senators, insanity. And we're saying it's pretty much swamp gas. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Or what was it? Venus?
In my schoolyard UFO encounters, because that fits in with that. Did you know that 2 weeks after the Hillsdale, Michigan incident was Westall High School in Melbourne, Australia?
Oh, yes.
2 weeks later. It was funny because Jim and Cora Lorenzen after Hillsdale said, we've got a lot of cases over schools. They're doing something here. And Ray Fowler said the same thing. He says, I have 15 cases so far this year. 8 were over schoolyards. John Keel said the same thing. He says, they're attracted to schools. So after, that was one of there's like 5 or 10 really well-known schoolyard cases. Hillsdale is one of them. And it's such a good case. It's
100%. All right, so we got a question here from Atlantis is found. Hey, Atlantis, how are you doing, man? Does Preston believe aliens showed us the future or took us there? That's interesting.
I wouldn't say take you there, but yes, they can provide what would amount to, a glimpse of it. Because it's pretty easy when you're going down a pathway towards destruction to say, hey, this could happen. I do have cases of this. There was a gentleman who was he recently passed away, Kevin Kamen, who was taken on board, remembered it fully consciously, and the ETs basically told him and showed him, said, since you started messing around with nuclear power and exploding these nuclear bombs and devices, it's started what we call a countdown clock, and showed him in living color various natural disasters that would happen. Lots of hurricanes mostly, but earthquakes and landslides and tornadoes and so forth. And he says he saw some of them happen. And so yes, that is actually pretty somewhat common. They will show people full color images. I wouldn't say they're taking people to the future, but yeah, they seem to be able to have that ability to look towards it, certainly.
Now, I don't know, Michelle, did you want to jump in there? I got another question.
No, go for it.
Oh, okay. All right. What have you learned about how their technology works? And the only reason I'm asking this, and I'm asking it kind of very general like this, is because I caught a little bit of your show yesterday with Dolly about learning how to control the craft. So why is it that they want people to learn how to control the craft, or would let them learn how to pilot these things? And what do you know how their technology kind of works? What's going on there? So,
yeah, Dolly could probably speak much better to this. I'm gonna have to hook you guys up because
I think she said she was going to email us to come on. So more than welcome.
Yeah, I think you would really enjoy speaking with her about this because other people have certainly described it to me. No one quite as coherently and extensively as Dolly has, but in essence, their technology is very, very advanced. not just a little bit. We're not talking a couple of hundred years or even thousands. It's millions or billions even. So our attempts to reverse engineer these craft are somewhat laughable. There has been some progress, I think, but it will never be to the degree, because these craft are flown psychically. And Grant Cameron is another researcher I respect, has put out a book called Sky Pilots, which talks all about this. And he interviewed dozens of people who've had this experience. And there's no exception. Every single one of them described these craft as being alive and flown psychically. So this is a kind of technology that is so far beyond what we can even conceive. And this is why people who are taken on board are somewhat struck by how sparse the furnishings are and the equipment, and almost nothing in these craft that we can see. And they will have chairs sprouting out, or tables, or instrumentation coming out of the walls perhaps. But these craft can change in size. They're often larger on the inside than they appear on the outside. And of course, they're doing things that we don't understand in terms of violating the laws of physics, which of course they aren't. But we see these things turning at right angles and moving so quickly and crossing interstellar distances and doing things. Their healing technology is straight out of Star Trek, zipping people up and all kinds of stuff. So their technology is so far beyond ours. And as a general rule, it's all about consciousness and being psychically driven in ways that we are just beginning to even get a glimpse of.
So it's probably even hard for us to comprehend what we're seeing when it comes to their technology. I mean, would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think this is why some researchers are like, oh my gosh, how do we describe this? I talked to one lady who was taken on board, and she's like, Preston, I don't know how to tell you this, but there was a couch there and what looked like a flat screen TV and an easy chair. And she said there was carpet. I'm like, yeah. She says, I asked her, what do you think of that? And she says, well, honestly, I think they were putting that there to help me feel more comfortable. I'm like, I agree. This is what they can do. And people have thought, well, is this a symbolic experience? Is this something else entirely? No, this is their technology that can interface with your own consciousness. A person's beliefs can often play a powerful role in how they perceive their experience. And the ETs will, to some degree, cater to that. Because again, they're not there to destroy your belief system or hurt you. They're trying to enlighten you, relax you, make you feel more comfortable, heal you. The real ET agenda is pretty simple. It's to guide, it's to teach, it's to heal, it's to wake you up to your own abilities. And they are ETs. They are people like us. They share the same genetics. They are humanoid without exception, pretty much. They are more like us than different. In fact, that is the message most extensive contactees will get is, we are you. You are us. We are one. When Dolly said that, I had to laugh because I'm like, yeah, I've heard that a million times.
Yeah, Dolly says it right here. She says, we are their children. Well, it sounds like they're watching over us. So, hey, I'll accept that. But yeah,
it's good news. I'm telling you, UFOs are good news for us.
Yeah, not sure, by the way, says Meow. Yeah, we got one of our cats. We have 3 cats that run through here, and usually they're already vocal by now. It's like as soon as we start live streaming, they decide to want to start talking. But this one, our black cat, she's all black except for a little patch of white on her, and she usually doesn't do the howling, but tonight she's decided to do it. So, and she's sitting here going crazy right now. So I think she's trying to get us in touch with our more psychic abilities, and I think she approves of the interview. Huh? She's over here going nuts. But yeah, so quick question. So we noticed that in your bio you talked about teaching. You had taught classes before. Care to elaborate on those classes that you taught and What was your experience with them? Since we're both teachers, we're very interested in that.
Yeah. Well, I've done a lot of workshops on UFOs, certainly, some on ghosts, but one of my real passions is actually astral projection, out of body experiences,
Oh,
which is really cool because that is connected to all this. A lot of people who are contactees start experiencing astral projection, and I find it really synchronistic and probably not coincidental that as soon as I got involved in this field, I started having these experiences, which I actually will say I sought. Having experienced the passing of my mother in 1984 when I was 19, so quite young for her and for me to, have to deal with this whole ordeal of passing on. I started having lucid dreams, pre-lucid dreams, I should say, and became interested in the idea of out-of-body experiences after reading Robert Monroe's book about his own experiences. He's very well known in this field, but he gave exercises on how to do it. And I tried them for about 2 months before I had my first OBE, out-of-body experience. And that's all it took to convince me it was real. Because you see your body on the bed, you're like, oh my gosh, there is life after death. You can go out of your body. And it opens you up psychically. So you start, this is certainly true in my case, but absolutely true. People will start having past life recall and clairvoyance and telepathy and healing and the whole deal. So yeah, I pursued it very much and got actually pretty good at it. And it's still a huge part of my life. I've written a book about it. So I do teach classes on that and have taught several family members how to do it. And
which book is it? Is it the Out of Body Exploring book?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay.
It's my only autobiographical book, so I'm about to put on another.
Oh,
because, oh my gosh.
Tell us about that. Tell us about that.
Wayne, the things you can do. Can't recommend it enough. It's fun just going out of your body and flying. That's worth the price of admission. And we all do this, by the way. Any dangers are far overblown. They're just not real. It's as safe as sleeping. We're doing it every night. I just need to put that out there. And there's no special qualifications. The only real obstacles are fear, laziness, and skepticism. Those are the three things that stop people from doing it. But the things you can do, oh my gosh, you can learn about past lives, as I mentioned, but visit your spirit guides, your deceased loved ones. I got to see my mom. And since then, I've seen pretty much all deceased loved ones, including pets. Oh, there's nothing quite as rewarding as seeing a deceased loved one. I had a nephew pass recently. I saw him. A brother, saw him. It's amazing, but it goes so far beyond that. You can visit what people call the Akashic Library. And that's just indescribably brilliant. You will love it. The other side, the heavenly realms, I guess you would call it. I'm not really a religious guy, but there is a heaven, I can tell you for sure.
Now, were you saying this was Robert Monroe's book?
That's the one that woke me up to it. Yep.
Okay. And then you have your own book about it. But then you said you had a second autobiography coming out.
Yeah, that first book, Out of Body Exploring, is the first autobiographical book. It's about my own experiences. And I'm putting out a second one about my out-of-body experiences, which I'm going to describe, visiting enlightened masters, people who are full-on enlightened, or a healing temple. I've done that. The things you can do are outrageous. It's just off the charts. I cannot recommend it enough.
All right. Yeah. Well, there's another one I got to pick up.
I hope to get that out later this year. I'm working on it now.
Okay.
Man, oh man.
Somebody said earlier in chat, I think it was Michael Kennedy, that said you were the hardest working UFO researcher on the planet right now. So
shout out to Michael.
Yeah.
The check is in the mail, Mike.
All right.
Yeah,
so
he's a great guy. Yeah. I see, some of the questions. I do recognize some of these names. Shout out to Michael.
So we're going on 2 hours. What's that?
And Guy. So,
Oh, yeah,
hi,
Guy
Guy.
Barrett. Yes. He was one of our first guests that we had. I think it was like episode 4. He came on and told us about his triangle experience, and we've been kind of connected ever since. He just, probably lives about 100 miles north, well, 70 miles north of us. And so he's one of my companions when we do our other live show that we call After the Cast, where we talk about the podcast that Michelle and I do with an interview, and then he'll come on and we'll do a live show discussing things about it and relating our own experiences to it. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. So anyways, we should probably start wrapping this up here. And so you already told us about the book you're getting ready to finish and trying to get out there. Anything else you have going on coming up here in the near future people might want to know about?
Oh yeah, I'm always busy doing this stuff. I'm obsessed still. I always work on new books. I just put out, Symmetry, of course. I do want to follow that up with another book with Dolly. Also, I've done a series called Not From Here, volumes 1 through 4. Volume 4 came out last year, and I'm working on volume 5. Those are all about the more unusual patterns of UFO research that don't get a lot of attention. Working on another book about people who've had very close encounters. I'm excited about that. So yeah, and the out of body book. I'm busy. I've got lots of stuff I want to put out.
Any speaking engagements coming up? I know there's Contact in the Desert coming up soon and other things going on. Any you heading out there at all?
Not Contact in the Desert. I spoke there a couple of years ago, which was really fun. Don't have any confirmed. I'm looking at a couple possibilities right now, but they're not written in stone yet. So I hesitate to mention it because I'm just not sure. But yeah, I try to speak at least 1 or 2 conferences a year. It's been difficult, of course, over the past 3 years or 4, or what have you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to get back into doing that. But yeah, was recently on Ancient Aliens. That was fun.
Oh yeah, tell us about that. How'd that go? What'd you talk about?
It was just kind of a talking heads show, honestly. Just about stuff that's pretty well known in the field. Some of how our government's handling the UFO phenomena, which I'm not super happy about, but it was fun. And I was on Keeping Up with the Kardashians of all shows, where I talked about how to call down UFOs, and Chloe did. She actually did. Saw an orb. That was kind of interesting.
Well, that's definitely an interesting place to end up. So, wow. All right. What else, Michelle? Do we got anything else?
We got to ask the signature question.
Yeah.
Do you have any ties to Michigan?
Oh, not directly, no. But I have, I do originally come from Illinois. We moved when I was 6, but we did go to Lake Michigan. My toes have been in Lake Michigan. So.
Hey.
Well, there's the connection.
And I know it's a huge hotspot. That state has a lot of activity.
It's when you start digging into it, it really, especially with the March 1994 thing that went on with Jack Bouchon, that it was such a sighting that they did a whole show on or an episode on Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix about it.
I remember that.
Yeah. We had him on the show a couple times, and what a great guy. 100%. I mean, down to earth, highly educated, scientifically minded, just running the radar and reporting his findings and stuff. And, he had to leave the state to basically save his job just for answering questions, of the police. They were asking him, what were these things? And he said, well, they're blips on radar, but I can tell you what they're doing and direct you to them. And just amazing stuff. And there was one other question that I had about that 1994 thing here in Michigan. There was a set of campers in when winter camping is not a huge thing here, but some people do it. And there was a couple that reported they were camping on the coast of Michigan, on Lake Michigan, and they saw one of these glowing lights, these craft or whatever in the sky. And Jack picked it up at, I think he said like 2,000 feet above the water, but they reported seeing a huge water funnel, like it was sucking water up out of Lake Michigan. And that was the first I've ever heard of anything like that. Have you ever heard of people seeing craft like drawing water up out of a lake or the ocean? And
well, I in my latest book, Not From Here, Volume 4, I did a whole expose of UFOs hovering over reservoirs and dams and hydroelectric stations. So there are a few cases of that, not as many as you might think. But yeah, I have certainly heard of a few.
Okay, so it's not
a
a lot, but it's not necessarily rare. I mean, they could be doing this and there's just no witnesses out in the water to see it, but there's obviously a reason that they're doing this from, people seeing them. That's very interesting. So, yeah,
well,
today
the Great Lakes do have a lot of activity. I have heard a lot about UFOs over several Lake Erie and all of them really.
Yeah. Well, this is a very special night for Guy because today is his 29th anniversary of his first sighting.
Wow.
Right. March 18th, 1994 was it
Happy anniversary.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. He went through quite a lot with that sighting, and man, so did his coworkers and other people in the area that were abducted and taken on board. So he was not, as far as he knows, but other things have happened to Guy. But that's a whole nother story. All right, Michelle, I think we're about to close this out. So
close
Preston,
out for the night.
It's been awesome having you on. Any last closing remarks before we end this? Because my voice is saying end it.
Just thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And if I had any takeaways for people, it would be that to look to yourself for answers, not the government. Move away from fear. Try to develop your own psychic abilities. This is a big message from the ETs. That's what they want people to do. Because if you want to reach out to them, you can telepathically reach out to them. We're all contactees at some level. So yeah, that would be my message. Live in love and truth.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, all right, Preston, we're going to go ahead and move you to the back. And dude, this has been a huge honor and pleasure for us to have you on the show and enlighten us with all of your research. I know we just barely touched, the surface of the things you've done, but it's been amazing. And I'm definitely going to be ordering some of your books here shortly. So, man, by the way, where can people find your books? Amazon, online? Where would we want to look for?
Yeah, they're not hard to find. I do have a website. Just punch my name. It should take you there. You can order them through the website or from online retailers or bookstores should carry them as well.
Awesome.
But yeah, I appreciate you having me on the show.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you very much and have a good night.
Have a great night, Preston.
Thanks. I sure will. You too.
Ooh, all right, ladies and gentlemen. Holy smokes. What an interview. I mean, this guy, he knows his stuff. That's a real investigator for you, talking to all these people. And I'm telling you, there's just so much.
And Michael said, don't let the fun go away. Check out Preston's YouTube channel. Just search his name.
Absolutely. And you can find those links to all of his socials. Once again, I know I was putting it in chat there at certain points, but go into the show description, click on the show more, and you will see all of all of the links. And Preston's got a big chunk right there to his Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, email address, all that. So, and I forgot to ask him, but I know there's like a ton of videos out there. He puts out a lot of videos and it's really, really great. Oh, somebody says show the cat. There she is.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
This is one of the three.
One
this
of
is
the
the
three.
oldest baby.
Yeah. Yep. She's a very smart cat. But yep. All right, Michelle. I don't know. You want to get out of here? I think we need to go.
Yeah, I'm gonna let her go before I get caught up.
All right, Dolly, make sure you contact us. All right, contact us. We'd love to have you come on and talk, and definitely going to be reading this book about your adventures. That's for sure. Guy, good seeing you, man. As always, be talking to you in a couple weeks. Now, remember, everybody, we are not going to be having a show for the next 2 weeks. So, but just hit that notification so that you know when we're going to go live again. And also sign up on iTunes and stuff, because all of these shows that are live go out as audio podcast as well. So all the new viewers, man, thank you for subscribing, coming on and watching. Amazing. You guys are amazing. This is why we do what we do. And we love hearing your stories and learning everything that we can. You know, that's one thing about teachers, is that we're supposed to be lifelong learners. So we're trying to,
We're proving that.
yeah, we're totally something out of our league for the last 2.5 years, but here we are still going. So thank you all very much. Michelle?
Have a great night, everyone.
All right, everybody. And remember, keep those eyes to that. What is it, Michelle?
Sky.
Sky.